Tonight, Vladimir Putin just hours away from conducting some of Russia's largest joint military exercises since the Cold War. Putin sending his top military brass to Belarus to oversee the joint operations. This is 2,000 more Russian combat forces have now taken up position along Ukraine's border in just the past 24 hours. These troop count, they said, is going to be heading close to 170,000. They haven't said exactly where they are yet, but that's where it's heading. And 2001 days show it's still building. And it comes as we're getting an up-close look at Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines. Alex Marquardt is out front tonight in eastern Ukraine.
Flying low over the Ukrainian countryside, this Soviet-era military plane heads toward the border with Russia. We traveled here with senior Ukrainian officials and military leaders to get a sense of the mood and preparations where Russian troops are the closest, near Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. This is Avdiivka, where many of these Ukrainian troops, who are mostly young men, have been fighting Russian-backed forces on this cold and desolate front.
Go!
They're eager to show us how they've been living and fighting here in a conflict involving Russia that has been largely forgotten, but which has taken over 14,000 lives in the past 8 years, according to the United Nations. Ivan has been here the whole time. Like the other soldiers here, he says they're confident they could face a new Russian invasion.
Of course, we're ready for some bad situation, and we basically wait here.
Do you think that will happen, this bad situation?
I'm not, I don't know, because I don't know what in the head of the guys in that territory.
But for you, the war has already started.
Of course.
We're taken to the farthest point forward, where sandbags and tires are piled high. Then, so there was just a burst of what sounded like automatic gunfire. We are just 70 meters, we are told, from the fighters on the other side of the front line. We're rushed away. Our escorts keen for us to see what happens, but not too closely. Hearing this gunfire and being so close to this front line, you can't help but think that even if diplomacy succeeds in preventing Russia from invading Ukraine yet again, this fighting, which has been raging since the last time Russia invaded Ukraine, will almost certainly continue. NATO leaders say that ending the fighting already happening here is a critical part of preventing further Russian aggression. With NATO so far refusing to send troops to Ukraine to fight, Ukraine insists it needs more help.
But the important issue, what they need, is additional weapons assistance from the West, from our Western allies, potentially financial assistance. That's what we need to make sure that we will defend not only peace in this country, but peace in Europe.
As if to punctuate their point, more gunfire rings out. John. Now, Ukraine has been receiving regular shipments of weapons from, amongst others, the U.S. and the United Kingdom. Just today, the UK sent another shipment of weapons. But, Aaron, as you heard in that piece, they say they need more. Two senior Ukrainian generals today telling me they need air defense systems, anti-aircraft weapons that could be used against Russian helicopters and planes if Russia decides to invade. The commander of Ukraine's ground forces tells me that they have made this request clear to the Biden administration, but they have yet to get a firm answer. Aaron?
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Live from Ukraine tonight. And I want to go now to Evelyn Farkas. She's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine and Eurasia in the Obama administration. Also with me tonight, retired Major General Spider Marks, who is head of geopolitical strategy now at Academy Securities. All right, welcome back to both of you. So, General Marks, you hear that Ukrainian soldier on the front lines speaking to Alex, and Alex says, I quote him, "For you, the war has already started." The soldiers reply, "Of course." Do you see Putin ending this, General, without taking more Ukrainian territory?
Not at all. I think there is a possibility for a negotiated settlement. I'm not sanguine that the conditions are right for that, but Putin is certainly not going to walk away without a win. So I would see some type of further incursion, if you will, into the Donbas region at a minimum for Putin to say, okay, now let's have a conversation about what the next step is.
Right, and of course, in doing that, right, definitionally, that is violating what the United States is the red line, right, an incursion. You're back to this fundamental problem. Evelyn, an administration official, tells CNN that in the past 24 hours, Russia's added about 2,000 combat forces to the border areas near Ukraine. That number's been going up and up and up. You know, I don't have the exact count right now, but they have said they expect 30,000 more to come in. You know, these numbers are getting up 150, 170,000 in terms of the estimates of who is going to be there, if not now, then soon. 2,000 in just one day. 2 weeks ago, we were talking, you told me you thought an invasion was 80% likely. Given what we're seeing day in and day out, how do you feel now?
Well, Aaron, I think you made the case. Nothing has changed. In fact, Vladimir Putin's escalated the situation, but I'm going to stand firm at 80%. And when I say, you know, an incursion or an invasion, what I mean is any type of military operation against Ukraine. And I would agree with the general that it's most likely that Vladimir Putin will go and try to seize the territory in the Donbass. That is the territory where the war has been ongoing and over 13,000 people have lost their lives, where your contributor, where your correspondent was reporting from. And he could use that as leverage to try to force an agreement on the Ukrainians. There's been this so-called Minsk process that the French and the Germans have been spearheading. It's going nowhere because it's not a very fair process to the Ukrainians. But the Russians could decide to kind of tip the scales their way by seizing that territory. I'm afraid to say I do hope for negotiation. I think there's a possibility, but it's still more likely than not that they will use their forces.
You know, look, it's all just very sobering, but you do have to judge on actions at some point, right? Actions, you know, it's not just standing there. It's adding and adding. And General Marks, we're now hours away from these massive military exercises, which both sides are holding at the same time. Obviously, that has its own potential peril attached to it. But how closely are you watching the exercises themselves, what they do, what happens?
Aaron, the thing that you see with this deployment of this size, first of all, it has all the combined elements that you would see in a combined arms team. That is, you've got heavy armor, you've got artillery, which the Russians use in abundance, artillery and rockets and infantry forces and logistics. You also have a joint force. You now have naval forces in the Black Sea. So when you look at this capability, what it tells you is Putin has the capability to execute an invasion tonight. To be determined what it looks like, the size and scope, but he's got the capability. But bear in mind that if he wanted to completely absorb all of Ukraine, number one, that would be a ghastly engagement. It would take a heck of a lot of time, but he'd need a force of about 800,000. He doesn't have that size in his military. When you look at the population of Ukraine and the size of Ukraine, he'd need a much larger force than he has presently arrayed. So it lends itself to a limited incursion, but still it's an incursion.
So this is, I mean, look, that's really significant context. So Evelyn, Russia has put out this list of conditions, and it says it must do these in order to have any kind of de-escalation. So let me just go through what they're demanding. Deliveries to Ukraine must be halted. Western military advisors and instructors must be removed from Ukraine. All joint military exercises between Ukraine and NATO must end. All previously delivered shipments of foreign weaponry to Kiev must be taken out of Ukrainian territory. Okay, that last one, even on its own, that's not going to happen. So are these demands anything that could be met? I mean, even logistically?
Okay, Aaron, I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah.
It's absurd. I mean, they're asking for a unilateral disarmament. They're asking the Ukrainians, don't defend your territory, just roll over and play dead. And you, the rest of the world, let us have our way with a demilitarized Ukraine. It's untenable. I mean, but it goes to show you that they can't really be serious about negotiating if those are the kinds of, you know, demands they're making.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty stunning, as you said, right? To get all the weapons out and then just, you know, we'll sit there with a few 100,000 troops on the border and, you know, watch nicely. Thank you both very much. I appreciate your perspective.